welcome to Behind the Bar. It is day 9 of the Diddy criminal trial. A lot has transpired. We have had a week of testimony from Cassie Ventura, who is Diddy's longtime girlfriend. They had an 11-year relationship. This is a very, very complicated case because the relationship was so long. In a lot of criminal cases, Jason, you have a single incident, a precipitating moment that you're deciding, did this happen? Can we prove that this happened to the jury? Here we have an 11-year relationship that they're trying to build a case against Diddy, that the relationship was so filled with violence and coercion and nasty things that Diddy was such a monster that she felt compelled to relent to his demands for freak-offs, other sexual acts, and so forth. It's a very, very complicated case. So we thought it would be instructive now that she is still being cross-examined, but her testimony will wrap up maybe by today, if not early next week, just to take a step back and figure out what is the defense trying to do on cross-examination of Cassie to refute or rebut what the prosecution laid out in its case in chief, which shows Diddy to be a horrific, horrific monster.
Yeah, so the prosecutors have effectively laid out, Derek, that in this case, that Diddy was a monster. The testimony of Cassie has been overwhelming. From all indications from people inside the courtroom, she has come off as credible, that she really was victimized by this man for a long time. He beat her. He dehumanized her with sex acts that, whether or not she was initially eager or willing to participate in, she became less and less willing over time. Tried to express that to him. It sort of fell on deaf ears. He also secretly recorded their sex acts, sometimes secretly, sometimes not secretly recorded their sex acts. But however he recorded them, he then threatened to send them to her friends and family when she would begin to suggest that maybe she didn't want to continue to be in this relationship with him, or at least have the nature of the relationship remain like it was. He beat her physically quite badly on a number of occasions. He allegedly, she says, firebombed Kid Cudi's car because she was potentially starting a flirtation with Kid Cudi, a relationship with
Jealousy is infused throughout their relationship on both sides,
yes,
even by her own admission.
Yes, but he carried out that jealousy through some vicious beatings and allegedly firebombing this car.
The threat to release videos has become a very prominent part of the prosecution's case as well.
But in this point is so frustrating, both for us, but especially for people who aren't sort of immersed as you and I are often in the law and the way these trials go along. It's very frustrating, but he is not charged with a single one of the crimes that I just outlined. He's not charged with domestic violence. He is not charged with secretly recording her. He's not charged with extorting her for the secret recording. He's not charged with any of that. So as much of a monster as he is, everything that I just laid out is not enough to get a conviction. And maybe that can be frustrating with the system, the way it works, the prosecutors, whatever.
Those are state crimes.
Those are state crimes. He's not charged in this federal case with those. Instead, what the prosecution has to do is establish that she felt coerced into committing illegal sex acts with him, predominantly sex with prostitutes, coerced into illegal sex acts by virtue of his conduct, for fear that she would pay either a financial price, a physical price, whatever price it might be. She had to be coerced into these illegal sex acts. And the defense has spent the last 2 days trying to establish she was not coerced, something she wanted to do. And even if she didn't necessarily want to do it, she didn't do it because of this coercion to do it, legal coercion. What does the defense try to do? Lay this out for us.
It's a perfect encapsulation. They are attacking this nexus. They are not going after her testimony about the violence that she endured. They're not going after whether these things happened. What they're saying is they happened for different reasons than coercing her into commercial sex acts, because they know, these defense attorneys, that that's what needs to be proven to convict him for sex trafficking, that he did it to keep her performing these sex acts. So they're willing to concede, because I think they have to, that there was violence, but that the violence was for other reasons, for jealous rages, for anger about Cassie potentially stealing drugs from Diddy,
stealing his cell phone, which may have had text messages with another woman, all this stuff. But this is not relating to, according to the defense, relating to the sex.
And the way they're doing that is through showing this 11-year relationship in text messages. That's what they have in terms of concrete evidence. So what they opened their cross with was a lot of loving text messages at the beginning of their relationship. I love you, smiley face. I'll fly anywhere for you, showing how into Diddy she was. I'm not sure this gets them very far. All relationships, even ones that end in disastrous violence, start off pretty loving. So I'm not sure how far that gets you, but they're trying to humanize Diddy somewhat, as what he was hearing from Cassie sounded like a lot of affirmation, sounded like a lot of consent and enthusiasm for the things that they were doing.
Not just affirmation. Yes, that's the point. It showed that she was really into this stuff at first. She was soliciting these freak offs. She may say, initially at least, that it was because she wanted to make him happy or whatever it was, but it was consensual, fully consensual. She was not being coerced. I don't think there's any argument that initially she was ever coerced into these acts. She wanted to do them.
I think that's right. Now, they really honed in yesterday on this exchange between Cassie and Diddy after their first freak off. So at some point, the first freak off she described in her opening testimony happened when she was 22. So you're around 2008 or 2009. She described that she felt humiliated and confused, nasty feelings inside. And they're contrasting that with what she wrote to him in text messages afterwards, one of which was, "I'm always ready to freak off. It can be whenever." So if you're in Diddy's head, it's not necessarily that he's saying, let's do a freak off, and should be able to read the cues that she's not into it. At times, she was texting him that she was down for these things. So a reasonable person might receive those text messages and say, I think she's into it. And that's what they're trying to establish.
But even if they can't establish that, Derek, I think to the point that we were making at the top, they have to show this coercion, not just that she was coerced because she wanted to appeal to him, not just she was coerced because she thought she'd be okay with it and mustered the strength.
That she was scared.
They have to show that she was scared, or that he was threatening her. And at this point in the relationship, it comes later, don't get me wrong, but at this point, there's no allegation that he was threatening her with her career, with anything like that, in exchange for the sex.
That's right. And that is what you're seeing in terms of the way they're cross-examining her. They're asking her about the swinger lifestyle. We heard this in his opening statements. We were swingers. So they've asked Cassie, what does that mean? Were you in a swinger lifestyle? And she has acknowledged on the stand, and I think this goes to her credibility. She says, yes, we were swingers. And that is a sexual sort of lifestyle, but she was careful to say, but that's different than these freak-offs. So Cassie is hip to what the defense is trying to establish. She has been very well prepared by the prosecutors that this is going to be a wedge they're looking for. And she's saying the swinger lifestyle is one thing, and I was down for that. The freak-offs became very abusive. So I think she's doing a good job of, sort of sustaining these blows on the stand in certain ways. But the defense is getting some testimony. And I thought one other exchange was very, very illustrative. There was an exchange about a freak-off that occurred around the summer of 2017. This is long into the relationship.
Now the prosecutor's trying to establish she's very much being coerced into these freak-offs this late.
That's right. At that point in time, Cassie has testified that she was not into these things. Now, this exchange is about Diddy texting Cassie for permission. He says, do I have permission to set up some freaky fun? Indicating that he wants to have a freak off. Her response was one word, and we're really teasing this all apart. She said ovulation. Now, some would interpret that as, no, I'm fertile right now. I don't want to have sex with a prostitute.
Right.
I could have,
That's the only real logical
That's the only
read.
real logical read of that. It's not as if a married couple saying, yeah, you're ovulating, let's have kids. She was saying no. Yeah. Diddy then persisted in asking, okay, well, can we just kiss a lot? To which Cassie responded, yes. So Diddy's team is setting up this exchange as far from forcing sex upon her. What I did was take the no of we're not going to have sex, and then I modified what the freak-off would be. Can we just kiss for a while? And Cassie was on board with that. They're trying to establish this as clear evidence that there was consent. I think on redirect, what you're going to hear is this kind of exchange shows just how scared she was. How scared she was to say no overall.
That's right. And not only that, anecdotally, we've heard about horror stories where women are like terrified in a situation, but they don't know how to get out of it. And so they consent in quotes, to kissing or some sort of petting, but sex, they draw the line there because they just want to diffuse the situation, don't want to be victimized by this person. So they allow themselves to sort of assert consent over certain acts, but not the worst stuff they really don't want to be a part of at all.
And this goes to, the expression is often heard, and I love this expression, things can cut both ways. You can read this as a text message and say, well, looked like she was consenting. What was Diddy supposed to think? He's like, I asked if we could just kiss, and she said yes. It's not clear which is correct. Text messages are very hard to read tone. What I'm wondering is, how is this landing with a jury of reasonable people? Does this exchange in particular seem like Cassie could have been clearer with her tormentor, or that she was clear enough and he was sort of willfully blind that she didn't want to do it?
I want to make 2 points in response to your question. The first is when we had Kirsten Brown Neal on early on, prosecutor, sex crimes prosecutor here in LA County, she said that the prosecution wants men and not necessarily women in the jury box. And the reason is because women can be harsher on women in these sorts of situations. They can say, well, you should have, instead of doing that, you should have done that. Whereas men
will say, hey, no real man hits a woman.
Exactly.
No real man would do this to someone like Cassie.
Women can be harder on women than men can be on women. And
that's
by the
true.
way, the jury is 8 men and 4 women. The prosecution was more than happy to allow a lot of men on the stand in the jury box for this exact reason. So I think this might really cut against him, that there are all these men sort of looking at this going, what the hell are you talking about? But then the other point, he
has 4 women and he only needs to really convince one that, Cassie, you could have done a better job of getting out of this relationship. I'm a woman too, and I would have walked away. There's someone on that jury that at least defense counsel thinks they placed who they'll be able to convince.
Right. Now obviously that's remains to be seen, and jurors are under a lot of pressure to come to a consensus. But the bigger point that I think Diddy is saddled with is that if the prosecution can give the jurors enough, not everything they want to get them, but enough to suggest that there's a conviction here, that you can find him guilty, there is so much atmospheric bad crap that he has done to her, so much abuse, the testimony is horrific, that the jurors might say, you know what, I'm not quite sure if the prosecutors achieved every element of that crime, but I'm not going to worry about that. This guy needs to be in prison.
And look, that is the prosecution's approach. Is it's cumulative. They're just throwing the kitchen sink, and oftentimes you'll feel defense counsel will say things like, "This is just cumulative evidence. You can't. It's starting to prejudice us against Diddy." But it's really the way they need to prove their case, because they don't have the one smoking gun.
Right.
They need to prove.
They don't have a text message saying, if you don't have a freak off, I will show this video to your family. There's not even a trial.
That's right.
Diddy has pled at this point.
That's right.
But that doesn't exist, so they've got to do it through this.
And the judge will give them latitude to do so.
Yes.
That's the nature of their case. So he's giving them a lot of breadth of the ability, a wide berth to prove their case in this way. And I think it's ultimately going to be very damaging to Diddy. One thing that was brought up before we ended was there was a line of questioning of Cassie after the 2018 closure dinner. They had a closure dinner where she says it was a little weird, he was acting odd, and subsequent to that dinner, he raped me. Yeah. That is her testimony. She says they're asking, what did you tell the prosecutors and the authorities when you were describing this event to them? And she said that she wondered whether his behavior that night was attributable to bipolar disorder.
Yeah.
By raising the issue of Diddy being addled by some sort of psychological illness like this, what does that do for his case?
Well, I mean, it potentially goes to his mental state and whether or not he actually intended to commit the crimes for which he's charged.
Which you need to prove in every criminal case.
You must show that he intended to.
Except for statutory rape and things like that.
I'm not sure that dog hunts here. I really don't. His acts are so purposeful over such a long period of time. Not to say that he couldn't be bipolar the whole time, but I just don't. I just can't see a juror being persuaded that he was out of his mind when he
that you can conduct that for 11 years.
Right.
Yes. Right. I think it won't ultimately work, but they're trying everything. Look, they've got to defend him, so they're going to attack his mental state and they're going to try to establish that he wasn't in his right mind when he's behaving this way. But I'm with you. 11-year relationship, you can't lean on that.
So let's go to a few questions. Colo FSCO, I don't know how to pronounce that, says, you do realize Cassie only has circumstantial evidence. It's her word against Sean Combs. First, a couple things.
This sounds like a dirty word. It's the way most cases are.
But it's also, circumstantial evidence means the absence of eyewitness evidence. There is definitely eyewitness testimony here, both from Cassie. You're going to hear additional witnesses come forward. Former employees of Diddy's named Mia is going to come forward, and that person is going to testify that they witnessed certain things. I think what you're getting at, though, which is a good point, is there's not that smoking gun text message that we were talking about. And Diddy's counsel is going to make a lot of hay. They're going to say, look, they sent each other thousands of text messages. Where's the one? Yes. Even one that he sent where he actually cajoled her or coerced her into a sex act. Not one.
That's right.
You're going to say, so therefore, maybe it didn't happen. You know, that's going to be
the absence of that one smoking gun will weigh on some jurors' minds.
So it is not a circumstantial evidence case. There's plenty of eyewitness testimony, but nevertheless, there is that missing a smoking gun.
Let's go to Big Teddy 9843. He says, so he's on trial for being a freak. I've heard nothing about human trafficking.
You
Now,
haven't heard-
remember,
yeah, you
these are
haven't heard
early
it yet.
days.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
they're going to have witnesses who were brought across state lines. You will get plenty of trafficking evidence in
By the
this
way,
case.
Diddy's not even going to challenge that.
He's basically conceded the,
Yeah.
the transportation across state lines. There's even just by the testimony and the way they're handling this, he's not going to win that.
And just so you know, that's all human trafficking is. It maybe sounds more egregious than that, but it is simply bringing an individual across state lines for the purpose of illegal acts, that illegal act being prostitution. So it's that is the human trafficking. They're going to have countless witnesses that say that he was engaged in that. Diddy's never denied that he did that.
I think he'll fold on that and
Yeah.
accept that and accept that.
Yeah. So actually, Josh Howard, a very similar question. He has issues with how the hell did this end up in federal court? How did this end up in federal court? Bring across state lines.
That's it. Once you have interstate commerce, that is a big way to have federal jurisdiction. There are a couple ways to do it. That is a very big one, and that's why you see that element in these charges. Most crimes, most criminal acts are state crimes. Murder, everything you've heard of, robbery. These are all things that are handled in state courts, and they're in a particular jurisdiction. As soon as you go state to state, you don't know which state to prosecute someone in, so the feds come in and say that is now a federal offense.
And just not to get too down on this, but too much on this, there's something called the Mann Act. It was passed by Congress about 100 years ago to stop this exact kind of thing. Because in some states back in the day, prostitution was not illegal. So what they would do is somebody, a John, would go across state lines, pick up a prostitute, bring them back to his house in the illegal state and say, or leave that, bring a prostitute across state lines to the where it's legal, have sex with them there. And the feds wanted to stop that. So they say, if you bring somebody across state lines for the purpose of illegal sex, we can prosecute you for that under the Mann Act.
Exactly right. All right, let's go to one. We've got DJ Young C, I'm sorry. Is Dawn Richards set to testify? Yes. Dawn Richards from Danity Kane has been scheduled as one of the next witnesses that the prosecution will bring up, so we'll keep you abreast of her testimony.
And finally, the Infinite Mind says, whether she agreed or not, he took it to another level. Again, we hear you. We understand that. We agree with you. He is a monster, this testimony shows. That is simply not illegal if she agreed.
Yep. So that'll do it for today. We will see you guys next time.
Bye.